Hey, future lawyer. Welcome to the LSAT Simplified podcast presented by Hey Future Lawyer, where we talk about all things LSAT, law school admissions, and otherwise. If you want to check out our free LSAT course, go to heyfuturelawyer.com to sign up for a free account today. Hey, everyone. In this week's episode of the podcast, I am talking to Troy Anderson. Troy is a not current law student. He just graduated from Cornell Law in the past few days. He was a 3L, and now he is off to prep for the bar. Troy has done a lot of working with LSAT people himself, as in people prepping for the LSAT. So he is also an LSAT advisor. I don't really like the T word in tutor, but that's probably what he would consider himself. Anyways, Troy knows a lot about the actual legal practice / job game, which I know a lot of you are interested in, because obviously when you go to law school, you have to get a job, or at least most of you do, unless I guess there could be some of you that don't need jobs, but realistically, you're going to want a job. And Troy can kind of speak to what his experience was at Cornell. He does in this conversation. We talk about a lot of things, including the applicability of the LSAT, what the rankings mean, or what the ranking change means for Cornell, all that good stuff. So without further ado, I will kick it over to me and Troy. Alrighty, so this is Troy, who recently graduated from Cornell. Yeah, Troy, if you don't mind introducing yourself, what's your LSAT story journey? How did you end up as a fellow LSAT dork?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated from Arizona State University in 2021. I was student body president. Before that, I was vice president of policy, did all of those kinds of things with student government. I really knew from an early time in college that I wanted to go to law school. I was initially an architecture major, and I switched like before classes even started to political science. And then I started really getting through that degree fast. So I ended up adding a philosophy minor and then changed that minor to a major and just discovered how much I loved reading, writing, critical analysis. And I figured, well, this is, probably the best excuse to go to law school that there is. And really started honing in my career based off of that. So around, let's see, in the May going into my senior year of college, started studying for the LSAT, scored a 151, I think. So I think that you and I, Ben, might be
Yeah, we're
similar to
twins.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scored a 151 to start. Within a couple weeks, I think I was a special case because I studied formal logic in college. Like that was my specialization in philosophy, was logic and ethics. So very used to logical reasoning kind of stuff. Within a couple weeks, I was in the 160s, but it took me forever to break into the 170s. I think it took me almost, probably took me about 6 months, 7 months to break into the 170s. It was really slow for me. But then once I broke into the 170s, it was like I would never go back. It was crazy. Um, so I took the LSAT twice. Took it once in November. I think I took the November LSAT, scored a 172. No, I scored a 171, I believe. And then I was satisfied with that initially, but a friend of mine scored 1 point higher than I. And so I was like, well, I can't have that. And started studying again, took whatever next LSAT there was. I can't remember if it was April or whatever. Scored a 174. And then I took a gap year because I wanted to apply early in the cycle and really maximize the schools that I was looking at getting into. For me, my top schools were obviously like Harvard, Yale. I didn't apply to Stanford. I'm not a big California guy, but I applied to Harvard, Yale, and those kind of schools where if you get in, then you're probably going to go. But other than that, my top school was Cornell, and I also had Georgetown, UCLA on the list. But luckily, I got into Cornell with a very, very generous scholarship. I got 75% to go to Cornell, and I really was like, well, this was my dream school from when I started out, and I may as well go there.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear the delayed gratification. I think a lot of people, when they get their 171, they just fire in apps right away. And it really
Yeah.
does lead to substantial differences. Like I had one girl this cycle, and we were just talking about her because we had to redact her episode, but she got, I think, like a 167 and could have applied last cycle. But then she got a 173, and now she got into like a ton of T14s and is headed
Yeah.
off to Harvard in the fall. It's like what a difference 1 year can make. So
Yeah. Congratulations to her. That's amazing.
Yeah, she is just like a genius, and she'll never accept it. It's so funny the correlation between the people that have it the most together. She's like the most neurotic. Like she would always email me, be like freaking out. Like you
Yep.
are the person who has it the most together out of the people I'm working with, and yeah, she's the one the most. I guess anxiety is a superpower in a weird way in
Yep.
situations like that. Um, so yeah, with your journey to Cornell, so you finished the LSAT in April. It sounds like. Did you immediately start helping people out, or what was your journey to then teaching
So
LSAT?
I actually started tutoring for really cheap after I scored my 171. Um, It was either 171 or 172. I can't remember off the dome. But after that first score, I started teaching for very cheap. I think I started teaching for like 10 bucks an hour because so both of my parents were teachers. They're both music teachers. I grew up in this kind of household where I knew that teaching is a much different skill than actually doing the thing itself. So I wanted to build up that skill with maybe less money than I thought I was worth at the time. Um, so I did that for quite a while and gradually started raising my price. Worked briefly with another tutoring company, then went back out on my own and did it again on my own. Um, so I started pretty early on after that 171. But after the 174, it's like there's different levels of understanding, and it's kind of crazy how at a 174, I really thought that I knew pretty much all that there was to know about the test because I was PTing at like 180s straight before I went and took that test. Um, and it was a level of knowledge that I know I didn't have at a 171. Like at a 171, I was very confident in my ability. But there's just kind of that niche, weird knowledge about the test that you get that bumps you up those like 3, 4 points.
Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. I actually think that I wasn't that good at the LSAT when I took it and scored my 99th percentile score. Like it's funny in hindsight to even say that, but it's also like looking back and it's like there were definitely questions where like on a parallel, I was just not good at parallels because I was always very much so in like respond mode to LSAT arguments, which is great on
Mhm.
weakeners, flaws, assumptions, etc. But on parallels, I was never that I never paid that much attention to the details. And
Yeah.
it burns you on those because a little different. And now they're so easy in hindsight. It's like, how was I ever bad at these? But I remember on my official LSAT just being like, well, it's A or B. I don't know which one. So we're just gonna go with A, which is such
Yeah.
a poor way to do the test. And then we had logic games back. I imagine, no, you must have done logic games because you just graduated law school. There's no way.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I did logic games.
it all gets blended. Yeah, how do you feel about logic games being lost? Do you think that's a good thing? Positive?
So I feel a bit mixed about it. On one hand, I think that they're such a gimme for when we were taking the test, and or at least when I took the test. I loved logic games, and I was really good at them. My second time taking the test, I realized that I missed a rule in the second game on the last question of the game because I was like, "There's two correct answers here, and that's not possible." So I did the rest of the section and then went back and redid that whole game, and I still had like 5 minutes left. So I was really good at logic games, and I really like logic games. At the same time, I don't think that they have much of a I don't think they have much of a crossover with what actually happens in law school. I think you can make the argument of you have to think creatively, you have to think outside the box and figure out how to problem solve and all those kinds of things. Which, I take the point of the people who say that. I get it. But at the same time, I think that I would prefer if there was a single that instead of replacing LG with like another one of the pre-existing sections, I wish that they took just a single really long prompt and made you answer questions about that one really long prompt, like 25 questions about just that one prompt, maybe essentially 4 or 5 reading comp passages put together. I think that would be much more demonstrable of how you will do in law school because that is, you know, people come to me and they say, "Oh, I hate reading comp." Well, you shouldn't go to law school if you hate reading comp because you're reading maybe a couple paragraphs for reading comp. In law school, you're going to be reading like whole cases, and they are not interesting for the vast majority of people. Okay. So that would be so much more demonstrable to me, at least, than anything that Logic Games ever did.
Yeah, it's interesting because I never thought logic games was relevant as far as the actual underlying skills.
Yeah.
Other than what I liked about logic games is that if you worked hard, you got rewarded. I just did not meet the person who studied for LG properly and didn't get like -2 minimum. It's just you
Mhm.
would figure it out. And then further, not to go down this road, but with accommodations, it's just like truly everyone can solve it because you can just brute force them if you had accommodations, which is not optimal. And this is probably bad radio for everyone listening who doesn't even know what logic games look like. But it was the most, I'd say, everyone who put in proper effort would get there. Because I'm
Yeah.
sure you can relate to this, but there are some people that are capped on logical reasoning or reading comp. I think it's a lot higher than the average person perceives their cap to be. But there
Yeah.
are people that are never going to get to the 175 range. Like that does exist. Um, I don't see that really with logic games. It's just like, well, you just did 5 games and called it a day. It's like you got to do 100. Like there's many of these that have been released. Yeah, have you seen what LSAC is talking about doing? Because my impression is that they are. I think the LSAT is losing predictive ability. They haven't published stuff about this, but there does seem to be internal. I don't think scrambling is the right word, but they're considering how to make this test more predictive again, now that there's such a bloat of high scores and it's lost. Like there's back when you applied, I imagine there weren't that many Troys. You were a finite resource. And nowadays there's a lot more of you in the pool.
Yeah. When I applied, I had a lot of buying power, and I knew that I had a lot of buying power, and that was to my detriment. I will fully admit that.
Yeah,
I didn't. I very much lucked out in getting into what was my top school. Um, and we can talk about that later. I know we have a section to talk about, Cornell a little bit and what I love about Cornell. But, if my top school was like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, I did not have the actual capital that I thought I had in order to get into those schools. So that was definitely to my detriment. But I've taken the kind of controversial opinion that I think they should make the LSAT much harder. Um,
totally agree with this.
in
So,
order, yeah, in order to kind of cut down on those 98th, 99th, 97th percentile scores, and make them more of what they were like 10 years ago.
yeah, well, this gets to a whole separate thing, and I won't make you take a stance on this because this is definitely one of the ones where I get myself in trouble. But as someone who does LSAT prep, I will just tell you accommodations for what Reddit thinks is out of control, it is so much worse in reality. Like whatever people perceive
Interesting.
is 5 times as bad. I would wager it's probably around 50% of people that do not have the. I mean, I didn't ask you your time limit. I took it under the 35 minutes, and I imagine most people did, and you don't have to say it, but it's not the same test when you have double time versus
Interesting.
35 minutes. And but I think they're in a pickle because with LSAC, they lost a lawsuit back in the day. I don't know the exact nitty gritty, but I do know
Yeah.
that, or at least that's my understanding for why they're so lenient with. I mean, I have people apply with, they go to their therapist and say, I'm stressed about the LSAT, and
Mhm.
the therapist will write them a note, and that is sufficient for LSAC's purpose. They'll give you double time. A lot of my kiddos are now removing their experimental, so they're all taking a 3-section test. They don't even take the 4th section, so it all counts. And LSAC doesn't require any higher burden of proof. It's just the same, like, sure, yeah, if you don't want to take it, you don't have to take it. So
Interesting.
I think there's a lot of, and I do also see this correlates pretty heavily with the more well-resourced people that know the game as opposed to the people that
Mhm.
don't. So I don't know, maybe, and it's hard because I guess like how do you address this problem without completely breaking the system? But it does appear to me at least that the current system is untenable, at least to the point of it's just producing constant numbers and it's hard to even compare them to each other. Um, yeah, so bringing it back to Cornell, what, because it sounds like it was your number one choice from the get-go, even when you were still considering the Harvards and the Yales. What drew you to Cornell and what made you want to go there?
So there are a lot of things. I'll start with like probably the most inconsequential to most people, which is the environment. It's a if anybody has ever visited Cornell or upstate New York, or if you're from the city, you'd consider Ithaca like middle of New York, but I don't care. It's still upstate to me. It's a very kind of like broody aesthetic area. And so I was a philosophy major in undergrad. That really spoke to me a lot. I loved the environment. It also is kind of like the opposite side of the coin of Arizona. There's not much to do in Arizona besides go on hikes, go on trips, be outdoors and do those kinds of things. Ithaca is very similar in that it's just cold, but the activities are essentially the same. You can hike, you can swim, you can go kayaking, you can do all these kinds of things outdoors. And that really spoke to me. So, but that's probably going to be the most inconsequential to most people. Um, just the beauty of the area, the beauty of the school. But aside from that, I think that Cornell is and probably always will be considered an underdog of the T14. Yes, I still consider Cornell a T14. Oh no, sue me. But I think it will always be considered an underdog of the T14, but our placement in Big Law is insane. Our placement in federal clerkships is really, really good. And our placement in what's considered like unicorn PI, so like ACLU, those kinds of things, is extremely high. And when you look at the actual numbers, I think the lowest that somebody could reasonably place Cornell is number 7. That's me personally. Um, Obviously, I'm very biased, but looking at our numbers, I wanted to go into private law. I wanted to have the opportunity of doing a federal clerkship, and I wanted to be in a small class with a smallish law school. And that is exactly what Cornell provides. It is small school, like 200 people tops, a couple transfers every year, and that's about it. And so you really get to know your professors, you really get to know career services, and they're all extremely honed in on knowing who you are, where you want to go, and placing you where exactly that you want to go. Um, that's essentially why I wanted to go to Cornell from the very, very, very beginning.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I'm curious what we've been working on our own rankings. It's a little bit harder
Yeah,
to do than, but basically what we're looking for is purely outcomes based, which might be a
yeah,
little silly to do, but it's so silly that like library size gets factored in, or I mean,
yeah.
honestly, we don't even care about selectivity with LSAT and GPA because I think it's a good proxy for figuring
Mhm.
out what caliber of grads people are producing. But fun, it is a proxy, and the
Yeah.
firms and clerkships are a pretty good measuring scale of how the players that be actually view a school's grads. So yeah,
Yeah, you want to see where the students are going.
yeah.
What I've started to tell my own students is, if you want to use US News or above the law rankings or whatever other law rankings that I think that Georgetown actually has a law ranking based on um, like income to debt ratio, who is most likely to pay it off over time. But you can start out with whatever rankings that you want, but you should really hone in on where you want to go by looking at the 509s, by looking at the required reporting, looking at where the students go, what the student population is like. Because a lot of people make decisions without actually understanding the school or visiting or touring or understanding where those students tend to go. If you want to go to, like a boutique law firm in New York City, like one of my friends is doing. One of my friends got a fantastic offer from a boutique firm where he'll be making more than big law salary his first year out of law school. And you're just not going to get that opportunity from going to a place that's not really Cornell. We have really good placement in those kinds of situations.
Yeah, well, if things don't work out with whatever your career is, maybe the Cornell admissions staff will get you to like do their marketing because you make a very compelling case. And it's one that I agree with for the listeners who know me more so. I'm always yelling about the ABA employment reports, which do lose a little bit. I occasionally make fun of Georgetown based on their ABA employment, and people have pointed out that it might lose something in the wash because it doesn't account for people that self-select into various public interest, which is true. I always really boil it down to big law plus federal clerkships, which while imperfect, is I think about the best public measurement that you can get for every school in the country.
Yeah.
And yeah, by that metric, Cornell is definitely way up there because like you all perform very well. It's out of curiosity, is there any chatter at the law school when supposedly UT and Wash U and Vanderbilt have quote unquote passed you up, or does no one really care and you guys stay in reality?
Um, so here's what I'll say. I think that Vanderbilt, UCLA, WashU, UT, all great schools. One of my future coworkers went to UT for law school, and I think it's an astounding. I think it's a fantastic school. I think that Vanderbilt's a fantastic school. All these other, everything within the T14, I think has very strong merits. Um, that being said, I think that the general vibe from Cornell has been you can say that you're a T14. You can say that we're outside the T14. That does not make it true. That has been the general vibe that I've gotten from my classmates and from, just being around and hearing things.
Well, and fundamentally, who cares what people on Reddit say? It's so silly, but it is unfortunate because, and I'm sure you've run into this, people speak with such authority on it. Like, oh, now going to Cornell is a bad investment on your money.
Yeah,
Relative to like, it's like, oh, go to UCLA for full cost over Cornell at a half scholarship, which to me just
yeah.
seems like a insane decision to make. But Not that
Yeah,
UCLA.
I mean, if you want to go public interest, then maybe UCLA is a solid choice for you. If you get a good scholarship from UCLA, if you want to go public interest, if you want to go in the California kind of West Coast market, that sounds like a solid choice.
I think I misspoke. I meant Cornell at like half price versus UCLA at full sticker is what I
Oh
meant.
yeah, I mean, then yeah, it's such a judgment call
Yeah.
that I would never recommend going to law school at full sticker price, really anywhere. I wouldn't recommend my students go to Harvard, Yale, Stanford at full sticker. Even though those are kind of the schools where it's viewed like you get in, you go. I know students from HYS that have gotten no offered through OCI, which is for those of you who don't know, OCI is like it stands for on-campus interviews. That's like the process of where you get your 2L summer job. Typically, now it's been moved up by quite a bit into what's now called pre-OCI, which is now becoming the new OCI. It's crazy and everything's accelerating so fast. But I know people from HYS who have gotten no offered. Is that really a risk that you want to take? I don't know. I got a 75% scholarship at Cornell, and I thought, you know what, that's a risk that I'm willing to take, and it's paid off for me.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very rational way to view it. I think unfortunately people just don't always. Well, I think part of it, and this is where the misinformation annoys me, is that it clouds people's decision-making matrix with information
Yeah.
that's not true. Because then people will, I mean, the one thing of going to like the highest ranked school no matter what always blows my mind. Utah is another one of my punching bags. They're ranked 28, and I have no idea how. Because like if you add up their employment to big firms and federal clerkships, it's like 10% of the class, which no offense to Utah grads, but that's just if you're going to Utah for the rank, that's deceptive. Like there's almost no one, which it could happen, but it's unfortunate because people will message me like, "Oh, Utah's T30," and I'm like, "Right, but do you want to live in Utah and work at some like Mormon mom and pop like law firm where they like have a picture of Joseph Smith in the door?" Not that there's anything wrong with that if that's your vibe, like more power to you, but also
Yeah.
realistically, that's probably not why people are going to a quote unquote T30 law school, at least many of them. So I find,
I mean, my own view that I have a feeling that you'll probably agree with this, but I think that outside of the T20, you should go to where regionally you're going to get the best offer.
yeah,
So it's like if I didn't get into a T20, um, I would have gone to, and I truly mean like T20 from when I was applying. Back then, Vanderbilt was like 18. Vanderbilt's a fantastic school. It has great national placement. But if I didn't get into a T20, I just would have gone to the best state school that I could have gotten into, that I wanted to practice in that state. So, past the T20, I take the view of more like you should go to law school where you want to practice and just get as great of a scholarship as you can get.
yeah, I totally agree. Because then even with the schools that have high placement, like the Diamonds in the Rough, like for
Mhm.
example, Tulane in Louisiana has really strong
Yeah.
placement because there's really not that many strong schools in the Louisiana, Texas area. But their placement evaporates if you take off Texas and Louisiana. So it's like if you like that area, more power to you, they'll have big placement. But if you're, I have to imagine if you're trying to get hired in like DC or New York out of a Tulane, the connection just isn't there. But people see the big law and occasionally just confuse that as the end all be all. So I did have another question, and this is very open-ended, so you can take this in whatever direction you want.
Yeah.
But upon now completing law school and beginning bar prep, do you think the LSAT is a relevant test to the skills that are needed for law school and legal practice?
So I've been a long time kind of supporter of the LSAT. Like I said earlier, I wish that they would make it much more difficult. But I think the general skills that they are trying to test on the LSAT typically have a decent crossover into what you're going to be doing in law school. Um, More so with reading comp. If I had it be my way, which I guess if LSAC ever wants to hire me, this is what I would encourage them to do, but I would make it essentially one long reading and then an open-ended writing test. How well can you read and analyze? And then how well can you write and actually take what you've learned from what you read and apply it? Because that's all that you are doing in law school is what are you reading and how can you apply it? This is why, so a very, very quick asterisk. When I was a junior in college, going into my senior year in college, I worked on the Hill and I was in a lot of Senate and House hearings when AI was first getting like big, or when it was a little bit under the radar, but starting to make a bit of a breakout. And I've never been concerned about AI in the legal field because it is really, really bad at taking information from multiple sources like case law, statutory law, and synthesizing it in a way that, first of all, even makes sense. And further, is able to create new law, like what you're supposed to be doing as an attorney, arguing for the synthesizing of different things into a new perspective on how the law should be treated. AI is really bad at that. But that's all that you're doing in law school is how can you take, you're never going to get easy tests on your finals. They're never going to say the exact thing. So like Billy goes up to Alice and says, "I'm gonna hit you." And then he tries to hit her and he accidentally hits Daisy instead. Okay, where's the assault? Where's the battery? Right? It's never going to be the easy test. It's always going to be the kind of hairline, gray, in between area. And that's all that you're doing in law school. So I think that a writing test based off of what you've read and then maybe doing some multiple choice with what you've read, that would be my perfect test. I don't know how exactly you would grade that objectively. I think that it's either the GRE or the GMAT that does something similar, and they've seemed to find a way. So I think that that would be the most demonstrable of how you're going to perform in law school. But until then, if that ever happens, I think that the LSAT as it is now is decent at showing how you'll do. If you're scoring in the, even if it's just to the point of like, if you're scoring in the 99.9th percentile, you're probably going to put the effort in to do well in law school.
Yeah. No, I actually totally agree. I think the LSAT is a solution to testing what like LSAC and the law schools need to evaluate people on an apples to apples basis. I don't know that it's the solution to where it couldn't be replaced. I do think that the proposed replacements have been basically non-starters in terms of I think a lot of it comes from people that don't measure up well with the LSAT, and then instead of acknowledging their inadequacies in measurement, they blame the ruler. And realistically, you could come up with another ruler, but you're still going to come up short, at least for many of these
Yeah.
people. JD Next, I've seen people that have scored in the 130s on the LSAT, then score a 90th percentile on JD Next. So to me, it has absolutely no credibility because, for lack of a better term, I consider people in the 130s functionally illiterate. And
Mm.
it's always harsh to say, but if they can then score a 90th percentile score, it's like, well, something is being lost here because this test, I don't know. I worry when there's such a disconnect. I'm like, it's losing something. Or maybe it's the sample of people that are taking JD Next that is just so non-competitive. And for those of you
Yeah,
listening,
I'll be honest, I know really nothing about JD Next. I have
yeah,
heard the name get thrown around. I don't really know anything about it.
well,
Um,
there's a few things. For one, it's for profit by some company. Two, it is basically a Coursera course on like contract or like one of the first 1L doctrinal courses. My take
Interesting.
on it is it looks really easy, and anyone who puts in half the effort will score pretty well. Um,
Interesting.
like it'll be like a multiple choice, like kind of that first example you gave of like the assault and battery on like Billy,
Mhm.
Alice. But
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, maybe there's validity to it, but the law schools, as of the last cycle with data, they accepted 20 people that took it. And realistically, we haven't gotten to this, but I'm guessing those are 20 people that are probably getting ripped off to attend pretty low ROI schools where attending at the cost they're being charged
Mhm.
probably doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of the writing. LSAC, to my understanding, is working on a writing section, and I'm not sure how they're going to do that, but I believe that is in the works with their 1,000 employees roughly, which always that number always gives me a giggle when I hear there's roughly 1,000 people up in Newtown, Pennsylvania. But they're doing something behind the scenes, and hopefully they pull it off. Because I think an actually good scored writing section, if they actually measure for like succinctness and actually what's
Yeah.
relevant, you can probably speak to this better than I can, would probably add something that the current multiple choice loses in the weeds.
No, I totally agree because all you're doing for the most part in law school is writing. That is what matters. How good of a writer are you? And I thought that everybody thinks going into law
Oh,
school that they're a good writer. Everybody. I mean, I was like 4.0 summa cum laude from ASU with a philosophy degree. I thought that I was like, and a published thesis. So I thought that I was a really good writer. And I came in and I mean, man, the quality of writing that is demanded of you at a place like Cornell is much, 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 much higher than anything I ever experienced in my life. And that is like a very sink or swim moment. So I think I really hope that they roll it out and that it's successful because that would be super exciting to see.
Yeah.
Um, that'd be really great.
Yeah, they're not known for their speediness, but I do think it's in the cards. They announced it won't be next cycle. So now at the earliest, it would be August of 26 is when they could
Yeah,
start it. And even then, realistically, I would take the over on that. I doubt they're going to be ready come August, but they could. I think
yeah,
it's just a data collection and probably on their end. Well, I'm guessing they have to see if it's predictive and actually make sure that if they're going to score it, does that score actually translate to like 1L grades? So that gives them, if they collected data this year, that means they probably, maybe they could roll it out next year, but even then, it's a pretty small sample. With that, do you have any just quick writing tips that you think the undergrads or pre-law school people could benefit from in like 30 to 60 seconds of just like things you see people do where it's like, why do you do that? Eliminate that from your writing.
yeah. Passive language is the biggest one. Passive language needs to be gone. It needs to be done. You need to so there is a place for passive language, and people will fight me on this and be pedantic and say, well, there's always a place for passive language. Sure, yeah. But um, you need to get used to writing in only active language so that you can understand when passive language is proper. So if I'm writing a statement of facts, this is what happened here, blah, 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 A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like, here's the timeline of things that occurred. Yeah, I'm going to use some passive language there because the judge is not necessarily looking for like the most persuasive thing yet. They just want to know the timeline, what happened. But when you hit the like actual meat, the analysis of your argument, it needs to be all passive. You need to use passive, or sorry, all active. You need to use passive language very, very strategically. And then the second tip that I can give is you need to this is something that my legal writing professor drilled into my head, which was be persuasive from the very first sentence that you have. Every sentence needs to be persuasive. You need to reread your sentences over and over and over and over and over again. See where the emphasis is placed. See which words are being emphasized, and where are you putting certain clauses or certain things in your sentence? Is it at the end? Well, why is it at the end? Because you don't want people to pay attention to it. Is it at the beginning? Because if it's at the beginning, people are going to notice that from the like that's what's going to be put in there. So you need to be very, very careful about how you construct your sentences because that's what you're getting paid six figures for.
Yeah, no, I think that's all great tips. It's funny how much of these are, I'd say, just like universal. I don't know if universal truth to life is the best way, but like I
Mhm.
see things because we run ads, and one of our things is like after you've written your headline, you've spent 80 cents of your dollar. Like it's like that is the whole thing. Like because half the
Yep.
time, if that's a weak headline, no one's reading past it. So you would just have to hit that. Not say that you disregard the rest of it, but you got to lead. I know that's not exactly what you're saying, but it's so funny how you see these things, and it's like, man, that maps perfectly onto it.
Yeah.
Do you all? This might be a really dumb question, but do you like run Grammarly like when you're like writing legal stuff, or is there a software that you use, or are you guys pretty forbidden from using that?
I don't personally. I don't know what some of my friends or coworkers have done. I assume that they probably don't either. Um, because here's the thing. So I have how do I want to say this in a way? Okay. All right. So I have toyed around with AI with questions that I know the answers to. AI generally is really bad at, and I already went into this earlier, so I won't go on a diatribe here, but it's really bad at one, getting the right answer, and two, writing it in a way that is understandable and what would be considered proper for the standards of a school like Cornell. So I don't use any writing tools for a couple reasons. The first being that I want to continue to build that skill in myself. And if you rely on AI or Grammarly, um, or even like spell check to some level, you're kind of using a crutch. And you're going to just harm yourself because your expectation is to be a master of the English language. That is the expectation. That is why, you're getting hired for a clerkship. That's why you're getting hired to the ACLU or to like some big firm like Kirkland Ellis, who's going to pay you $240,000 odd dollars now, or a boutique firm that's going to pay you $300,000. They're not just going to hire anybody. They want masters of the English language. That is your job. If you're using AI or Grammarly or something like that, I view that as kind of a crutch. That's going to inhibit your ability to become a better writer in the future. Um, and the God's honest truth is that I can write much better than AI. All of my coworkers, all of my fellow students can write much, much, much better than AI in a shorter amount of time that it would take to edit any kind of AI statement. So I don't use any. I don't know if any of my friends do, but I doubt that they do.
That's really interesting because I don't use ChatGPT for stuff, but I use Grammarly just for like emails and whatnot. And I
Mhm.
think where it's best, and this might be different than how I conveyed it, but I find that it's really good at whipping me on things that I do poorly. Like for example, I wrote an LSAT book. It's really short. I won't plug it because
Mhm.
it's kind of outdated. Well, it's not outdated. It's just that there's easier ways to get it. But I use the word just a lot in my sentences where I would write you just need to do X, and
Mhm.
Grammarly would tell me to like cut that. Like that word adds no meaning to that sentence. It's just clogging it up. And because you can just say like you need to do X as opposed to you just need to. I guess
Yeah,
it adds a little bit of meaning and that's saying it's because it seems reductive as in that's all you need to do. But that's where I found value is it would tell me like that's not something you can do. Or alternatively, it will yell at you if you construct, which I guess in a way is what you're saying of it's allowing you to kind of do it yourself as opposed to like editing yourself and finding these
Mhm.
things. I've always found it was nice to just have it pointed out because what I found is over time I would stop doing those things because I was like AI's or not AI but Grammarly is going to tell me, hey dummy, like don't write just, and so I would just omit it from the get go. But
Yeah. I think that I mean, I take your point there for sure. I think that the difference is that I have like, for 3 years, I've had a very highly paid legal writing professor look over everything that I do and just absolutely crack me for every single tiny, tiny mistake. Um, so I think that that might be the difference of Grammarly kind of
yeah,
serves that purpose for many people. For me, I didn't need it because I had a professor yelling at me to not do those things.
yeah, that makes sense because I'm just doing kind of the low budget, shoddier version of what you have in your courses, and I found it like I don't even really need it anymore because I don't do the. I had a few verbal or not verbal, but like written ticks that I would do just over and
Yeah,
over, and just like stop doing that. And I just don't do them anymore because I've recognized that like, hey, if I write this way, Grammarly is going to hop in and like underline it with. It's not grammatically incorrect, but rather like that is a poor way of constructing that sentence. Don't do
yeah.
that. And nothing is as humbling as I first started it when I was like a junior in college. And as
Mhm.
a like poli sci 4.0 kiddo, I also thought I was God's gift to like written language. And you get humbled very quickly when you start like, and looking back, it's like I kind of cringe almost reading my college essays. I'm like, how did I think I was a good writer? Like the
Yep.
self-importance that I like detected myself, and it's just like, oh God, like who did I think I was?
Yeah. I
And
refuse to send my personal statement to any of my students because it is not something that they should look at for a model.
yeah, yeah, I've read mine. I think I'll do it soon in the future on the podcast just to make fun of it. It's not even that I think it's bad. It's just that writing is never done, and that's another. I mean, maybe this is different in legal writing where it's very objective based, and maybe that's the wrong way. Like I haven't been to law school, so I guess I shouldn't speak on it. But at least with like writing that's like trying to convince or convey ideas, every time I pull something up, I have something to tweak, and I'm like, oh, that I could have phrased in a better way. And so,
No, it's exactly the same with legal writing. It's never done. You can go through it with a fine-tooth comb and find something new every single time. There are many times where I've gone through like a memo and it's like, well, I could be more persuasive here. I could use a different word here to be more persuasive. I could put this clause elsewhere within the sentence and make it just a little bit more persuasive. Because my goal when writing, and I think that my biggest tip with writing is that you should want to make something beautiful. Because it is definitely noticed. I can always tell when something was taken, when somebody put a lot of time into the writing and it shows, and it's very persuasive when it's done that way.
yeah. So just from a human perspective, how do you have the grace with yourself to like be like, this is good enough versus cutting corners? Like, what measure do you use for like, I'm done with this document? While it may not be perfect because nothing is ever perfect, I'm
Yeah.
willing to like, it's good enough. Like, how do you do that?
At 11:58 p.m. That's the time when it's good enough because like that's at 11:59 it's due. So I'm working and working and working and working and working. That's kind of what you all will probably have a legal writing class in law school. Not probably, you will. You'll have a legal writing class in law school. And some will go the whole year, some will go only a semester, but regardless of what it is, you'll probably really dislike it because if you had no deadline, it would actually be really enjoyable. But because you have a deadline, you are working from the moment you get it, working, all the way up until 11:58 p.m. and you're like, well, I have to submit. This is it. That's the time where it's good enough.
That sounds incredibly stressful. But also for in a weird way, I'm sure it's maybe it is good that there's a deadline because otherwise you would just keep working on it forever in perpetuity.
Oh yeah.
Well, that does bring me to bar prep because you said you graduated just a day or two ago, and
Yeah, we had commencement on the 24th.
yeah, that's super exciting. Have you started all the way into bar prep yet, or what's the timeline on that?
Yeah, so I've started. I got a few days ahead uh, early on because I knew I wanted to take a couple days off for commencement and to have time with friends. So now I'm like back on track essentially. Um, so it just takes like, I would say from my experience so far, it's not as bad as other people make it out to be, but it is almost like going back and studying for the LSAT, and that it's just you got to sit down and, watch your videos for a couple hours, read the outlines, do your practice writings, do your practice tests, and it takes like, 6 to 10 hours a day, depending on what you're doing and how fast you are at doing those things. So it really does kind of feel like I have so much more time than I did during law school and so much less time kind of consecutively, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, I've gotten myself in hot water before saying that I could just pass the California bar, not without prep, but I'm convinced that with my command of the English language and a few months to prep, I would figure it out. Maybe this is totally delusional and narcissistic of me, but at least from I see people pass the bar and I'm like, well, I had you in LSAT class and I remember your work ethic and your ability. So if you can do it, I can do it. Do you have any concern about failure, or do you feel like if I take the requisite steps, I'm just going to pass and it won't be a thing?
I think that so I have full confidence in myself.
Mhm.
But I say that because I have full confidence in myself for everything that I do. Because if I don't have confidence in myself, then why should anybody else? So, and this is something that I tell my girlfriend all the time too, is, you have to, she's at this point where she's trying to figure out what she wants to do long term, if she wants to get her PhD or a master's or whatever. And it's like, the number one thing that I tell her and tell some of my students is you have to have 100% confidence in yourself that you're going to be okay, that you're going to do what's required. Because if you don't have confidence in yourself, then why should any employer, why should I, why should anybody else? So, when you ask that question, it's like, yeah, I will always have 100% confidence that I'm going to pass the bar. But I'm taking the requisite steps to get there. It's
Yeah.
not like I'm just gonna say, all right, well, I'm gonna be fine and sit around all day. I have confidence that I'm going to take the necessary steps in order to pass the bar. And so long as you do that, you know, it's a really hard test. It's really hard. It's mentally draining. But it's very, very, very passable. So, I haven't passed the bar yet, so I could be eating my words in a couple months, but you never
Well, I
know.
just asked this because we had a friend. She's just finished up her first year of legal practice. She's a first year at Greenberg in Austin,
Great.
and she was worried about the bar when she was taking it. And knowing her, it's like you're super smart. You've done all the work. Like, why are you worried? Like, because from the outside looking in, I was like, you're fine. Like, you've done it. You took the
Mhm.
steps. But I guess part of it is some people naturally get that anxiety of when it's so consequential, even when you've done the work. Because yeah, I was gonna say like I have like I would bet a substantial amount of my net worth on you passing the bar, having just met you for like 2 hours ago, for those of you listening,
Oh, well, thank you.
on the few things I know, just because, yeah, it's interesting though, because I see people very nervous and I don't know what the right word is. I do like what you said about like you have the confidence not blindly, but because I don't know if building the trust in yourself is the right way of putting it, but you take the action, like you do what you say you're going to do and you do what's required when you identify it. There's a lot of power in that because I see people have imposter syndrome and like I'm a super anxious person. I don't know that I'd say I have imposter syndrome. I
Mhm.
don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I find the best antidote to these things is just like keep the promises that you make to yourself. Make sure that when you say you're going to do something, you actually do it. And
Yeah.
then when that anxiety does bubble up, I find it's a lot easier to quiet. It's like I have done this, and if I commit to doing this to fix this problem, I know I'm actually going to do what I promised to myself. And I don't know, maybe that's like a little bit more life philosophy, but it's something I find really helps.
No, I totally agree with that. I think that when it comes down to everything, you revert back to how you kind of naturally are. So you have to take a lot of effort to push yourself to be naturally um, very hardworking at everything that you do. Nothing has ever really come easy to me. Um, I'm really proud of where I've graduated from. I'm really proud of what I've done with my life, but it's been extremely, extremely hard. Nothing has ever come easy to me. And so I've had to rely on the knowledge that I'm very hardworking and that eventually it's gonna, that's gonna pay off. So no, I think that that kind of underlying life philosophy is still good for the LSAT and especially for law school because the truth of the matter is, especially when you go to a school like, one of these really good schools, like one of these T20 schools, um, UT, Vanderbilt, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Cornell, Columbia, like one of these really, 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 really good schools. You're going to be competing with some of the smartest people you've ever met in your entire life. And all of a sudden you are the bottom rung of the totem pole again, even if you may have been the top dog in undergrad and in everything else you've done. Um, I mean, I can genuinely say that I'm surrounded by the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life, and it can be extremely demoralizing. So you have to have that self-confidence to boost yourself up. And that's what actually a good career services office will do for you. That's something that Cornell's career services has had to do for me a lot, which is, trust yourself. But I think that's an underrated aspect of career services to say, this is really hard. You're competing with some of the smartest people in the country at your age, and you have to know that you're good. You're also very, very smart, and you can do this too.
Yeah, and I think one of the best ways to have that confidence is to be able to look back at those past achievements where not to like really pump up the LSAT and make this like a whole LSAT ad, but it's a great chance to demonstrate that you're capable of doing things that you might not think you're capable of. Like when
Yeah,
I talk to people occasionally, and I'm sure you've ran into this as well. You'll talk to someone who's like, "Oh, I just need a 160," and you're looking at them. It's like you're a smart person. Like you can go way further than like a 160. Like
yeah,
why are you setting the sights so low? Um, and I think it often correlates with people that maybe have a little bit of that self-doubt, which can come from all sorts of like it's so funny you said that you really had to fight for things and nothing came easy. It's funny because I think we actually get to very similar outcomes in terms of self-perception. Although
yeah.
I think I have kind of the opposite. I was always kind of naturally good at things. Like I always just crushed standardized tests. I like got really good grades without trying. I was like naturally
Mhm.
like good at like the sports I played. And I came like from a pretty privileged background. Not that I really talk about it because it doesn't matter. And occasionally you catch strays for it. But like I came from Boulder, which is like not a poor area. It's a
Yeah.
lot of rich white kids basically is the best way to
Yeah,
describe
I know
it.
Boulder. One of my good friends is from Boulder.
Yeah, yeah, we might know each other. It's a small enough town, but anyways, but it's hard because at point it was like people are like, oh, you haven't accomplished anything because like that's the expectation. Like you're
Yeah,
supposed to accomplish things and like
yeah,
anything. So it's weird because it's like I think no matter where you come from, you can. And I never apologize for where I come from because like fundamentally, I think identifying with your like parent, like your family origin, I don't know. We just roll the dice when we're like fetuses and you just end up wherever you end up, and it's not
yeah.
a moral judgment. But occasionally I feel I don't know. Not turning this into like a therapy session, but it's interesting because like the LSAT space and law school, I think it reveals a lot about the underlying stuff. And if you have these issues, you're gonna have to work through them one way or another, and just find a way that like helps you. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if cope's the right word, but manage yourself because we all have our things that we have to deal with. And it's interesting though, kind of hearing because I hear it's like very similar. And like I hear things that I feel in my head that you're saying, and it's like we come from such different backgrounds and have taken different paths. Where I went
Yeah.
full LSAT dork parasite on the law school community, called. Um, I don't believe that, but people do say that. So, anyways, that kind of brings us to another or our final point that I was curious about. We have, I don't know if bonded is the right word, but we have interacted over Instagram over the
Yeah.
past month or two, perhaps, largely on posts that I think that I post more as a catharsis for myself because realistically for marketing, they're not very good. But it's kind
Mhm.
of messaging, I'd say that perhaps goes against a lot of the law school messaging in terms of this is always a good investment. It always works out.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much you pay, you just need one yes, stuff like that I see. And yeah, I guess this is kind of an open-ended question, but do you see what I would label as the grift in the LSAT / pre-law space? And if so, what messages do you think it resonates in?
I think so. When it comes to what I would consider like a grift, there's a mental state that I would attribute to that, right? If we're going all the way into crim law and to, some people that are already really interested in law school, mens rea is very important in criminal law. And I don't because I don't know a lot of these companies and the people who run them personally. I don't know if I can say that it's either a grift or if they truly believe that their advice is good because they've never been to law school or they don't know how it is. But law school can be, regardless of whether they intend to give this advice in good faith or not, law school can either be the best thing that you've ever done or a horrible, horrible decision that you cannot really crawl back from. For me, you know, I'll be totally open and honest. I graduated around the middle of my class, which I'm very proud of from where I came from and everything. And I graduated from a very, very, very good school that's going to take care of me. I have great career options. I'm blessed to have very, very strong career options. And I view law school as like I couldn't do anything else. This was what I was going to do. I love doing litigation. I love the practice of law from the experience that I've had so far, in like my clinics and stuff like that. So this is a no regrets situation for me. I've never looked back. But I also know people who have gone to, some law school where they have to pay 100% of tuition and they maybe didn't graduate top of the pack and they're in a not great situation financially and they view this as like, well, I've realized that now I don't actually want to be a lawyer. And that's a horrible position to be in. Um, so I think that, maybe there are grifters in this space. Maybe they do believe what they're saying is in good faith. But telling people that, you can go to law school regardless of your GPA, regardless of your LSAT score, and it's going to just work out is irresponsible. And I don't know what can be done about that other than potentially calling out those kinds of things when we see it. But I think it's really unfortunate because, first of all, most people don't know what it's like to be a lawyer until you go to law school and you do your like first summer or even your second summer, when you even kind of get some legal work, or you do a clinic and you see what it's really like to do legal work. And they don't understand the time sink that it is, or they think, oh, I can work 100% of this time. Like I can be that guy where I'm working all the time, all the time, all the time. The brutal truth is if you're scoring like a 150 and below, you're not that guy in my opinion, because you're not willing to put in that effort. You're not going to be the person that I was, where I worked constantly when I was an undergrad. And then I would come home after putting out fires as student body president all day and meetings all day and classes all day. And then I studied until 1 a.m. for the LSAT. So I feel like this is getting kind of long-winded and I apologize. This is just kind of how I talk. I know it's not the best. I'm trying to work on it.
It's
So I
actually great
apologize
to
to our
talk.
listeners.
Yeah.
But the summary of everything is I think there are a lot of people who view this as a business model, which is fine. Eh, but I think that there are responsibilities to being a tutor because there are people placing their entire careers in your hands and trusting you as an advisor. And so I have never told a student you can apply with a 150. I've just never told a student that they can do that. The lowest score that I think I've ever let a student apply with is like a 165. And otherwise, I'm like, you can't even apply. I'm not going to let you because the schools that you're going to get into, I want you to get like a full ride or 75%. And the schools that you're targeting personally are not going to give you that with that score and with that GPA. So I just view that as my responsibility as a tutor. I would make a whole of a lot more money if I didn't care. But I think that's our part of our responsibility. Um, that actually is, I've transitioned more into teaching for free now. I have my own program that we'll talk about like briefly at the end. But that's kind of my perspective. Does that answer your question, Ben? I apologize if
Yeah.
like,
No,
I
I think for the
rambled
most
on.
part. And I find the long monologues to actually be good for podcasts because these are complex ideas and to really convey them often requires thinking through them out loud and putting words to it. because
Yeah.
1 or 2 sentence answer, it's actually why I hate Instagram because I'll make a post and I won't caveat everything because you can't because
Yeah.
it's just a post. And then someone will point out that like exception, which exists to almost everything in this life,
Yeah.
if it's a destruction of the post. And it's like I posted one on bar passage, which was actually a really interesting research project of basically LSAT scores and how they correlate to passing the bar. It was actually less doom and gloom than I thought, where even
Mhm.
about 60 to 75% of people in the 140s eventually pass. Which what this does lose is these are 25 to 40% of people who spent 3 years of their life, $200,000, and then literally never passed the bar. So while it sounds like a
Yeah.
small number, this is destructive for their life. This is like you never bounce back from this financially. Um,
And I want to
yeah.
very quickly caveat this as well. What a lot of people don't realize is first time bar passage is extremely important because a lot of these firms that you'll be targeting, they'll give you maybe one fail. If you fail it the first time, um, I don't think it's common practice to say, all right, one and done, you're out of here. At least I've never heard of a firm doing that or of a judge doing that, even probably even less so with clerkships. But the second time, it's like you've got to pass the bar. There are a lot of firms that I know that will just cut you if you don't pass the bar within 2 times. Some are very gracious and will give you three, but that bar passage rate is so important. You got to do it within two if it's not the first time.
Yeah, and yeah, it's really interesting though, because the point I was making about this bar passage is that for one, 25 to 40% doesn't sound that high, but when you
Yeah,
consider, like you just outlined, the gravity of not passing, it becomes
yeah,
substantially more consequential. And then
yeah,
further, if you had a 140 to 149, you were paying full price for law school. Ain't nobody on a substantial scholarship with the 145. Um,
yeah,
and then one person commented, and it got 22 likes, which I just found funny. But they said 147 LSAT passed all UBE jurisdictions with the 280. As someone who's not in bar prep, I don't know what that means, but it's also
yeah,
like, right, like there are exceptions. Like these aren't universals where everyone failed. It's
yeah,
a tendency though of like you should, and then further, had this person put a little bit more LSAT prep in and gone to a higher LSAT, you could have gotten that same outcome without the debt in all likelihood. Um,
yep.
it's interesting though that you
And
say,
those people are exactly the type of people who are going to look back if they're really smart and say, "Hey, I struggled with the LSAT, so I need to put extra time into the bar."
yeah. And it's tricky. It's interesting that you say 165 is the cutoff. I've had people apply with part of it, I think, is a volume thing. I've worked with so many people over the past couple of years. And the other thing is I've done a lot of like group model over the past few years, which I really believe in terms of reaching more people at a more reasonable price. And for the
Yeah,
self-motivated person, it's such a better business model than tutoring. But the downside is I've now realized that if you're not self-motivated, it actually can help to meet with a tutor like once a week and just have like a check-in, like, hey, how are you doing? How are things going?
yeah,
Like, what do you want to talk about? Because I used to be very just anti-tutoring, period. Um, and like all things, as the frontal lobe develops, I've evolved on my thoughts.
yeah,
But
exactly.
it's interesting though, because people or someone commented on the same one. I know like ECH, which I think means EC, or like I know quite a few 147 and 154 LSAT scores who not only finished mid to top of their respective class, but passed the bar on the first chart with a high score. Even had one representing me in court, which I found amusing because it's like I can see why you are defending all LSAT scores because the logical reasoning might need a little bit of work. But
Mhm.
it's interesting though, because it's like, right, like there are these exceptions, and yet people get very Instagram has been really bad for my mental health. I get about 700,000 impressions a month, and part of that is you're just gonna run into crazy people. I have so many words that are in the filters. Like if you just comment a certain word, it just won't even post your comment because there's just bad. And occasionally you actually miss a good comment because someone was just using the word non-nefariously. But
Yeah.
it's man, so like all of you, it's funny. I'm mostly on social media, but you all got to get off social media. It's so bad for your health. At least for me. I mean that's a total tangent. But do you find yourself? Are you a social media user or?
I am. I'm trying to use it more strategically. Um, because, for one, I know that there are lawyers who this may be controversial, but I know that there are lawyers who are permitted by their firm or maybe they're in solo practice or whatever, who can be on social media and be very open about social media usage when it comes to legal stuff. I take the view that um, I think that part of what you're getting paid for as an attorney is your confidentiality and your ability to just like not even touch it. Say, this is, you and I, this is it. I'm not going to be telling stories anywhere. I'm not going to be saying anything anywhere. So I try and keep my social media very clear of legal stuff. The most that I'll talk about on social media is the LSAT, and that is the closest that I even get. But I'm trying to use it more strategically. I'm going to start up probably an Instagram for my program that I run. Maybe to just try and recruit strong applicants. I've been back and forth on it. But I, for the most part, try and stay off of social media because otherwise it just results in me doom scrolling, and it's just not good for
Yeah.
your mental health.
Yeah, it's so easy to say it's not good, and then it's another thing to actually not do it. Because I will also find myself
Yeah,
falling into the traps of partly because there is such good stuff on there when it's curated well. Like there is, I get a lot of really interesting ideas and information,
yeah,
but at the same time, if you exhaust it pretty quick, at least that's what I find. But it's so easy to just be looking for that, like our monkey brains are looking for that like random hit of dopamine, and it could be there, so you just keep scrolling, and yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. I also do appreciate your, I guess, addition of intent to the grift because I've been really so I'm in this all day every day, and I probably get
yeah,
more pissed off at the messaging than I should be. Like it actually like legitimately bothers me because I
yeah,
see the damage that it can do to people's lives. To the
yep.
point where I just assume that other people like me who do this all day know better and that you must know what the actual situation is. I guess it's possible that some of the people that opted out of law school because I guess had I not done self-education, even then I have a very incomplete picture of what legal practice is. Because I
Yeah.
often simplify things down to like, oh, it's either big law or like the 60 to 80K public interest job, which I know misses a lot of shades of gray. But I think just for simplicity's sake, it's a good way to paint things to people that are going to average law school.
It is. And my fun addition to that is there are places outside of big law where you can make a lot of money. One of my good friends is he's going to a boutique and he's going to be making 300K to start, which is more than Cravath scale. He's probably going to be working like walk-tail hours, um, which he's happy to do. Everybody in like the T14, everybody in the T20 schools is kind of like that grind set
Yeah, you
type of.
don't get there without that work ethic. So
Yeah, it's like if somebody came to me and was like, "Hey, Troy, do you want to work like 2,100 hours a year?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure." Because if I'm not thinking about legal stuff, my girlfriend would be the first person to tell you that I'm extremely stressed out when I am not working. So it's like an inverse thing for me. So if you come to me and say that, yeah, sure, absolutely, I will totally do that. The paycheck is the bonus. Um, but the important part, the most important part of that is in order to get into those spaces, you have to go to a really good school. So it's not like you said, the big law federal clerkship kind of view is when you combine those two things together, that's a good metric of deciding where you should go. You can include like all of the other non-big law jobs that still pay six figures probably into that field. Because if you go to some really bad school, um, you are not going to have your foot in the door in those spaces. Even if you're like top 1%, even if you're the top of your class, you're probably not going to get those ins because you don't have the connections, you don't have the name behind you, you don't have the brand behind you, you don't have the career services to support you. Um, that's just how it is. It's unfortunate. There is nuance to it, but the nuance is, well, you should still go to a really, really, really good school to get those opportunities.
right, yeah, because it's one of the hard things that someone will point out, like true things, like, hey, it's not quite that simple. Because like when I said those two paths, like it is just this, as in like big law, or it is like public interest, poverty. It's like that's a gross oversimplification, and it's not that public
Yep.
interest is even necessarily a bad career. I think it's a great career for people that understand the career trajectory and what you get, and
Yeah.
the very
You
real.
can be a prosecutor and make six figures.
Yeah, and like, should you stick with it? My understanding is that the benefits are good,
Yep.
retirement is solid, the work-life balance is more tolerable. I don't know that it's truly a 9 to 5, but it's more tolerable than big law. Yeah, if that's what you want, like I tell people, I actually got attacked pretty aggressively for being like the big law poster boy, which I think is really funny because like I just say consider what you want to do. If you're going for financial security, you should really consider if your school will get you there.
Yeah.
No judgment on that, like whether or not someone wants to do big law or fight for the turtles, which I don't even know that that's a thing, but if you do, like, do your thing. Like, I don't care. But I think it's because everyone else is so hesitant to even touch these topics. Like, I saw one guy. you may know who I'm talking about, but I'll just say the content of the post as opposed to actually saying what it was. And it was
Yeah.
the median salaries. And they said median salary for all lawyers in the US is 150,000. For first year private law is 200,000. And then first year public interest is 67,000, which
Hmm.
I actually went to like comment something and I fact checked it. This is from NALP and it actually is true, which I was
Hmm.
surprised by. But I think like what this misses is like, well, not everyone is offered those 200,000 because I think the subtext here or the reasonable inference that a lot of people get is they're
Yep.
expecting a $200,000 salary is reasonable because that's the average salary for a first year private lawyer. But immediate response, if someone went to law school expecting a $200,000 salary and did not set themselves up well, would you consider that even remotely a reasonable expectation if they're just getting into random law school?
Random law school, no. Because so like I said with my big asterisk is yes, that is the median for private salaries, but who is getting those jobs?
Right.
What population is getting those jobs? It's going to be, you know, filtered down from the T20, right? So who's going, and it's brutal honesty where if you are hiring somebody, this is actually another point that I wanted to make because you mentioned somebody who said like, oh, I even hired somebody who scored like a 140 or whatever on the LSAT and did whatever, right? Okay, the big firms, the individual is not their client. The individual is not the client of the big firm. It's like the multi-million dollar corporation. That's the client for like big firms and Wachtell, these boutique firms as well. So that's another thing that needs to be kept in mind of like the individual is not is not the target audience there for those kinds of firms. But second, that um, those jobs for those really good private salaries, they're going to primarily the top schools first. If you were hiring somebody, would you rather hire the top student from Harvard or would you rather hire the top student from no-name university in the middle of nowhere? A lot of hiring directors are not willing to take on, or recruiters are not willing to take on those risks because if they do, if they take the risk and they hire the person from no-name university who graduated maybe middle to bottom of their class, who is that going to fall back on if you're not a good attorney, right?
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. And it's why, like, I hope that in people listening, I never intend to be prescriptive with what you should do
Yeah,
with your life. It's more so just you should know the decisions you're making. And there's
exactly.
a lot of people that are very willing to inflate the numbers or to inflate the reality of law school salaries so that you will pay them more money for their admissions consulting or from LSAT prep. I have no issue with the free market. I think that there's all sorts of good services people can provide. I just
Yep,
think that you should make sure it's in alignment with your vision for your future. Which
exactly.
with
Totally agree with you. I know people who went for a full ride to their state school or close to it, right? And they're working at a job that they love. And I think that's fantastic. If that is your goal, and you get a full ride to one of those places, or you get a really good scholarship to one of those places, and you know that you're going to be able to pay off those loans because you know exactly what to expect, like what kind of jobs to expect. Fantastic. More power to you. The issue is when you have like a view of what your work is going to be like, that is just completely untrue. Not every there are people who strike out of OCI all the time. The difference is if you go to a school like Cornell, UT, Vanderbilt, Harvard, Yale, like the T20, T14, whatever metric you want to call it, you can be reasonably certain that you're going to be able to pay off your student loans even if you strike out of OCI because your school is going to have your back.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate the feedback and not, well, information for the listeners. Because this is not a popular fight. I don't know that you've posted, at least publicly, to the same level I have, but I've been
No.
called a lot of things in my time. A lot. It's actually funny. I worked with one woman from UCLA, and apparently she's in a group chat with people that are not fans of mine. And they'll call me like toxic and a bully. And it's really unfortunate because I think often these are things that are never intended to be mean but more so
Yeah.
just like reality checks of like, hey, like make sure you studied an hour for the LSAT. And if you can't, like really have a conversation with yourself about what is going to change because something needs to change if you want
Yep.
to go down this route. If you don't want to be a lawyer, like once again, more power to you. I'm really glad I didn't go to law school because and what's funny is I think I would have been more satisfied and happy as a lawyer than many of the people I talk to. And it's
Hmm.
like if I don't think I would have liked it, or maybe I would have, because I do think the academic. It sounds like you've been truly interested in the because like when you were talking about the construction of, I'm probably gonna say it wrong, but like either briefs or motions and really optimize it, it does sound interesting. Like how can you best compel
Yeah.
either the judge or whoever your target audience is?
Yeah.
Yeah, nonetheless, yeah, because it's definitely it's hard to fight the messaging because then you can get perceived as like the hater or someone who's like raining on parades. This is my least favorite time of year because everyone's announcing the law school they're going to. And every
Yep.
time I see a LinkedIn post from someone I went to high school with, I just want to comment, for the love of God, I hope you're not paying full tuition. And you can't comment that. And I shouldn't even say that. It's the people that I know are paying full tuition where it's like, this is such a bad choice. Yet
Yeah.
it's their biggest Instagram post of the year. And everyone's so excited for them because in the general public in America, we still just view law school as universally a good idea. And
Yeah.
I just find myself constantly fighting that messaging. So yeah,
You can go to a you can go to whatever law school and still make a ton of money, a ton of money. But there are trade-offs to be made, and you have to be knowledgeable about those trade-offs. If you go to a top school, then you're probably not going to have to market yourself all that much. You're probably going to, you know, get decent grades, get a mid to big law job or a boutique job, depending on where you just go to school, depending on what grades you get, or a clerkship. And it's going to be your resume that speaks for itself and your background that speaks for itself. But if you don't go to one of those schools where you're kind of railroaded into fantastic positions, what would be like considered dream positions for many, including myself, I'm going to like a dream position for me. But if you don't go to one of those schools that's going to railroad you into that, that's going to essentially force you into those kinds of things, then you have to be aware that you're going to have to market the crap out of yourself. And that's fine if that's something you're willing to do, but you're going to have to take on a whole lot more work on that side of things to maybe build up your own firm or join another solo practitioner where it's like an eat what you kill kind of situation, like PI essentially, right? So that's fine, but you have to be aware of what you're getting yourself into.
yeah. Well, I really appreciate all the insight, and it's a lot of things I've said. You put a lot more firsthand experience into it, which I think people will appreciate. Occasionally, I get the pushback of like you don't know what you're talking about, which is a
Yeah.
fair critique in certain ways. Because if you like, I still cannot adequately define what a tort is. Partly just because I kind of don't care, but also like I just time. Like I know it has something to do with like personal injury and like the water slide shouldn't have been there or something. Um, but yeah, so you do. I guess I'll let you describe it. But what do you do with applicants when if someone did want to reach out to you and talk to you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me in a couple ways, I guess. You can reach out to me through my Instagram, which I actually don't remember my own handle, so let me check. Oh, totally interesting name here. No spaces under Troy Grimm. You'll be able to find me. Or you can reach out through my email at troyandersonlsat@gmail.com. Um, that's spelled TroyanDerson at LSAT, which we all know how that's spelled, at gmail.com. If you want to potentially get involved in this program, I run an organization called the Grimm Legal Scholars Society. It's named after my grandfather. And um, it is essentially meant to provide, to help get traditionally underrepresented students into top legal programs across the country. So what you get is LSAT tutoring, admissions advice. We look over all of your papers, all of your essays. If you have any addendums to write, we help you with those. And we help you all the way through 1L into your first job. And I do it entirely for free. I take on probably like 4 to 5 people-ish a year. And so I'm looking for maybe 3 more spots to fill, but you get everything for free. There are like 2 caveats. First is that you have to listen to what I have to say. So if I say, hey, you're not applying this cycle, you're not applying this cycle. And second, you have to, the price that you pay for this program is you have to give back to your community and the program in some materially commensurable way, materially commensurable to the value that you've received. So I'd be looking for like $5,000 worth of effort, if that makes sense. But those are the only two requirements. So, for example, I have a former student who's now looking into tutoring the LSAT for some of the incoming students or mentoring some of the incoming students. For perspective, my goal is to get people truly into the top programs in the country. One of my students just committed to the University of Pennsylvania with about a 65-ish% scholarship, planning on going big law and then unicorn PI after that. And then I have another student going into, waiting on whether she's going to get into Stanford or not. And then she's going to be making her decision. So just some perspective. I don't care if you're an international student or if you are whatever. Any people should think about applying. All I require is a resume and a couple conversations with me and some of the current members.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And if you are looking for the help, we have I'd say pretty limited for those of you listening. Troy and I only met, what is it, like an hour and a half ago? So it is pretty limited, but we have interacted briefly throughout our time in the space. It is a relatively small space for, I guess we're geographically wide, but there's only maybe 100 or 200 of us that even do this, even semi-professionally, let alone as our full gig. So you get to kind of recognize the names out there, and you're definitely in good hands if you do end up as one of those kiddos.
Yeah, and I can say the same about Ben's work. I agree pretty much with everything that I've ever seen you post. So I could confidently say that, if you're a paid student and you maybe don't have the time to put into something like Grimm Legal Scholars Program, or because we have very, very, very limited spots because it's due to my bandwidth, I have full confidence that you do very, very well with Ben's program.
I also appreciate you saying that you agree with that. Geez, excuse me, that you agree with everything. Because like even I don't think I agree with everything. I know it's probably a little hyperbolic, but yeah, it's like
Yeah, I'll couch it and say that it was a bit hyperbolic, but yeah.
Like, I look back like 2 years ago and I'll be like, that was like I used to be such an advocate of the one-page resume, which I now recognize is just like it's not that simple. Like some schools want it, but a lot of schools want the comprehensive. But I think as long as you're willing to evaluate what's wrong when you're confronted with new evidence, it's not a big deal. Like we all get wrong in life, but cool. Well, I will also plug all your stuff in the show notes so that people can just click it as opposed to trying to like regurgitate it. And yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. This has been such a pleasure.
If you enjoyed what we talked about today or learned something new, please leave a review or a rating. It really does help us out and helps us reach more people. If you have a question or anything you want talked about in the world of LSAT or law school admissions, you can always email support@heyfuturelawyer.com to get it in the podcast agenda. Just put podcast in the subject and we will talk about it on the show. Alrighty, that's all we have for today. So I will see you all next time.